On September 30th, Governor Wilson vetoed Assembly Bill 2525. This is a bill that would have authorized the exchange of clean needles for IV drug users in California. The sharing of used intravenous needles is one of the primary means of transmission of HIV. Should IV drug users be given clean needles? Will this help stop the spread of HIV? Find out today on AIDS Vision. Welcome to AIDS Vision. I'm your volunteer host, Allison Arngrim. Today on AIDS Vision, we're going to be talking about the Clean Program, the Assembly Bill 2525, vetoed by Governor Wilson, and the subject of clean needles for IV drug users. Guests are Renee Edgington of Clean Needles Now, and Lamont, who's a person with an IV drug. Welcome to AIDS Vision.
Welcome.
Good morning. Now, Renee, you are the co-founder of an organization called Clean Needles Now. Mm-hmm. What exactly does Clean Needles Now do?
Right. Well, we're Los Angeles' needle exchange program, and we're a street-based AIDS prevention outreach program that's targeting active drug injectors. Excuse me.
So you actually distribute needles at this point to people with IVs?
Right. We're operated entirely by volunteers, and once a week at 4 different locations, people can come and exchange their dirty needles, clean ones. They can get needle kits and get alcohol wipes. They can get rinses and 2 different facilities in town.
But this being a volunteer organization is not government that are necessarily sanctioned
no,
by
we're funded.
The organizations?
No. As of this time, the Department of Health in Los Angeles does not have an opinion about needle exchange.
Now, Assembly Bill 2525 would have authorized the Department of Health to actually begin distributing clean needles under their jurisdiction?
It wouldn't have gone that far. It would have allowed the longest running and largest needle exchange program in the world, the San Francisco Prevention Point program, to get immediate funding from their local bodies. It would have allowed for different public policy and health officials in Los Angeles and other communities throughout California to entertain the possibility and start to investigate the possibility of establishing a pilot needle exchange program that would have been terminated by 1996.
So the image people might have had of Assembly Bill 2525 being clean needles throughout the city is not actually the case. It was to help fund an already existing program.
In terms of San Francisco, yes. In terms of here, it's really unknown what it would have, in a concrete way, affected Los Angeles. However, it is a step backwards and not forwards in terms of needle exchange throughout America.
So now at this point, any needle exchange must be done by independent organizations like yourself.
Right, and they have to function as an underground organization that is in defiance of the law every time we do the exchange.
Now, the purpose of allowing clean needle exchange is ostensibly so that people who are using IV drugs who might be sharing needles will have access to clean needles to prevent the spread of HIV. Can you explain for people who are watching statistically the incidence of HIV infection amongst IV drug users and how this would help?
Right. Well, we do know that the sharing of needles is the most effective way of transmitting the HIV virus. First of all, in Los Angeles, there are between 180,000 to 250,000 of injection drug users. And these are figures by the 2 UCLA researchers at the Drug Abuse Research Center, Dr. Douglas Anglin and Dr. Douglas Longshore. And I don't think people realize that our injection drug community is as large as one in New York. It's a pretty staggering number. I don't think we have accurate statistics as to what the HIV infection rate is among users. I believe our public health says it's somewhere around 8%. Places like New York is 50%. Either way, if indeed the HIV rates are that low in Los Angeles, we'll keep them low. Let's get more aggressive in terms of the kind of intervention we can do with needle exchange, and not encourage the spread of HIV.
When you give people a clean needle at your needle exchange program, what kind of information or counseling do you give someone?
Well, we're not caretakers. We can't coach every person and say, now don't share that needle, and and don't sell those works. Users have to do that for themselves. However, people are very aware of what needle exchange is, and people go to great lengths to participate in the exchange. We only operate for a couple-hour period, and if you could think about maybe yourself going to a pharmacy, say, within a 2-hour window to exchange your works and get other things you need to shoot more safely, I think people really go to great lengths to incorporate this safer shooting practice as a part of their drug-using behavior.
So you actually are getting a response from the IV drug-using community?
Yeah, it's a tremendous response and a lot of responsibility and risk. Carry those endpoints with however many they need to exchange for the week before people are just throwing them out. So that's another important factor. In terms of the needle exchange, we're also getting dirty works out of parks, out of the trash, and where they're disposed of properly.
Lamont, you are a person with AIDS who actually uses this program.
Yes.
So you have accessed the Clean Needle program.
Yes, I have.
Now, you are an IV drug user and you are still a practicing IV drug user. Can you talk about that for us?
Yes, I've been an IV drug user since 1984. As a matter of fact, it was just when the Olympics arrived in Los Angeles. And at the time, I was working, and it did not interfere with my work. At that time, I was only doing it perhaps every other week, and it was on weekends, so I didn't do it during the week, and it was basically for sexual purposes anyway, because it was and still is speed, and that is my drug of choice. At the time, getting clean needles was difficult because you pay anywhere from $2 to $5 per needle. Fortunately for me, I had access to needles, so it wasn't that difficult for me, but as time went on, my sources kind of dried up. So I had heard about this program coming to LA a couple of years ago through UCLA Men's Study. And so I was just waiting for it to actually happen. And how I found out about it was through KFI. Renee was on the radio, and I happened to listen to it. And I called that day, and then she got in touch with me. And
so this kind of information of getting things out on television has been effective?
Yeah.
On the radio, it's kind of sort of touching radio. This does work. Now, you mentioned that you use IV drug for your sexual practices, so as opposed to the standard image people have of people who are, say, shooting heroin every day. Is this fairly common that people who are shooting IV drugs for their sexual practices do not see themselves as addicts and may not see themselves as IV drug users and access these programs?
For the most part, I would say no, they do not see themselves as addicts because it's not something that they do every single day for the most part. As I can only speak for myself, and I myself do not shoot drugs every day. I only shoot drugs when I'm having sex, or I should say just before I'm having sex. And that is the only time that I shoot drugs.
Well, that brings us, of course, to the obvious question. If you're using clean needles and you clean your needles or you do not share needles, do you practice safer sex?
For the most part, no, I don't. And my sexual partners, who are fully aware that I am a PWA, choose not to practice safe sex.
Now, you have sex with people, you tell them that you have HIV, yet they tell you that they do not wish to practice safer sex.
They do not wish to practice safe sex. Not only do my regular sexual partners, I can even go, let's say, a step further. When I was a practicing prostitute, which was recently, my clients, whom I advised that I had AIDS, did not choose to practice safe sex. When I would tell them, they would say so. That would be one of the answers that I would get. The other response was that I think they looked that bad that I didn't want to go to bed with them, that I would tell them that I had AIDS.
So there are people who are patronizing prostitutes, and even when told that the person that they're paying for sex is HIV positive, is an IV drug user, they are continuing to have unsafe sex with them.
Yes.
We were talking earlier, and you talked about some of the sexual practices of people who engage in sex with sex workers and prostitutes and IV drug users, that in fact they tend towards more high-risk practices. I think there's an image of people when they hire a prostitute being serviced, and you said that this is actually not the case?
No, it isn't. It is the opposite. For example, most clients that I have were middle-class, married white men. And the basic practice was for them to give me a head job and for me to actually ejaculate inside their mouths. And this is what they wanted.
Is there also IV drug use between customers?
On
prostitutes?
numerous occasions, this was the way that I was actually approached. The approach was, the question was asked, did I get high? And I said yes. And they asked me what, they asked me the drug that I used, and I said it was crystal. And so they said, well, they had some. Did I want to get high and party? So my answer, whether or not I wanted to or not, was yes. And we'd get to the house, and they'd ask exactly how I did it, and I told them that the term that I would use is I run it, which means to inject. And most of them did. They actually did the same thing. I usually would have my works on me. A lot of times they didn't, or either they would ask if I had any, because it was something that they did.
So they did not carry their own works?
Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't.
So as opposed to the population that we see, people in the parks who are IV drug users, who are addicts, we have a population of people who are clients of prostitutes who do not carry their own works and are sharing needles and having unsafe sex.
Some, but just like I said, some of them don't. Most of them do have their own. Most of them do have their own works. So, but you do have some that don't. You also have some that I have experienced. I've had quite a few clients that had never shot drugs before, but because I did, and they had always heard about the rush behind it, wanted to try it for the first time, and did.
And they did not bring their own works, and they
No.
wanted to share needles.
Right, but I did clean my works out.
Now, how do you reach this population with the needle exchange program? He knows he's using the needle exchange program, but how do you reach clients, people who are going to prostitutes, picking up people in the streets, do not discuss this, are completely closeted, do not admit that they're having sex, let alone using drugs? How do you reach these people, these customers, who are asking to share needles?
That's a really complicated question. I mean, I think needle exchange needs to operate 24 hours a day. It needs to be in locations throughout Los Angeles. We need to be very, very aggressive in terms of all of our prevention efforts, which we haven't been in terms of American history. We've done very little in terms of preventing and educating people about how HIV is transmitted. I would like to think that some of those individuals are coming to our exchange. I do know that our exchange sites pick up considerably after 5 o'clock when people get off work. So again, the stereotype of the drug user as some sort of derelict with a needle hanging out of their arm is defied by my experience on the exchange every week. You know, some people come by with in three-piece suits. So if that's an identity of a closeted user, I'm not certain, but all different kinds of people use the exchange because addiction isn't any kind of one portrait of a singular kind of person.
Now, one of the things that Governor Wilson said in his statement of why he vetoed the bill was not even specifically that he was concerned that giving out clean needles would promote drug use, but he said that it would affect the credibility of the war on drugs. And it was an interesting choice of words, that there seems to be great concern about appearances and what people will think about the needle exchange as opposed to what's actually going on. What is your answer to people who say, well, to give out needles contradicts what we are supposedly trying to do in the war on drugs?
What war on drugs is my question. I see no evidence of a war on drugs out there. Drugs are easier to get today than it was when I first started doing drugs. Drugs are cheaper today than it was when I first started doing drugs.
The price has gone down.
The price has gone down. So where is this war on drugs?
But you also talked about the price of needles.
The price of needles, they have gone up because they are harder to get. So whenever there is a shortage, the price goes up.
So it's in fact easier to get drugs than it is to get clean needles?
Yes, it is.
And it is cheaper to buy drugs than it is to buy a clean needle?
Yes, it is.
I think this leads to the analogy that the war on drugs is really a war on addicts. And I think if you want to talk about, I mean, these war metaphors are really dangerous because always in them it is some sort of disposable or dispensable population or individuals. And understand America's zero tolerance. The fact is people do use drugs. People will continue to use drugs no matter what. It's true some people want treatment, but for every 10 individuals in Los Angeles that is trying to access drug treatment, only one can get a slot. And there's
And you mentioned that you do offer referrals to
Sure.
treatment for those who request them.
And people do ask for an array of different kinds of services, from HIV testing to people that want outpatient methadone, that want inpatient residential detox, in which in Los Angeles there's only 43 county funded beds for that service. Now certainly that seems grossly inadequate for the amount of injectors in this county.
So do you think that the people who oppose the clean needle exchange pretty much have this stereotype of the heroin addict in the street, and that if they knew that there were the three people in the three-piece suits coming after 5 o'clock, that they might think twice about this?
I think people are incredibly judgmental about addicts, and I don't really wear the stereotype. I think partly because people don't claim that identity with a lot of comfort. Or if you're recovering, run around and tell, oh, by the way, I shot up for 10 years. I mean, you go back into the woodwork, you continue your life, and you know, it's not an identity again someone would claim really proudly. I think most are really embarrassed about their years of addiction.
So this is why many people who do not themselves as sex partners of IV drug users, which is a common category, they always say HIV risk sex partner of IV drug user. But you're saying a number of people are IV drug users don't know that they in fact sex partners of.
Sure, and Mary Fisher is a perfect example, who is now the new appointee to the National Commission on AIDS, and at the Republican Convention talked about how she contracted HIV, which was through her husband, who was a closeted IVDU. So it even happened in the best of Republican families.
How many people do you think are really aware that there are Republican IV drug users?
We'll have to take your camera out to our exchange one day.
We should take a poll, find out how many people at your needle exchange are voting for Bush. I'd like to know this. There's been a lot of talk about experiments, things that went on in Zurich with their needle program there, but then there was also the study done out of Yale on clean needle exchange programs done in this country. Can you comment on that, on successes and failures in those programs?
The New Haven Yale program is really impressive in many ways. It really shows that users in the program, as in all the programs across the world, there are 3,000 needle exchange programs across the world, that they really do lessen the transmission of HIV. And they showed that within an 8-month period. And New Haven, unfortunately, is a very, very high HIV population in terms of injection drug use. It's over 50%. And so that's a very, very interesting program that the Department of Drug Enforcement tends to allied and said that significancy.
What kind of number are they getting, though? They show reduction.
Well, they showed
of clean
30% in terms of HIV rates within people using the exchange, as opposed to people that were not using the exchange. And so that's pretty tremendous figure. They're going to be in town soon, the two researchers from Yale, so maybe they can come to your program and talk about their study a little bit more. But I mean, also the evaluation results from their program is no different from ones across the world, and so LA tends to be very kind of reactionary and seems to be isolated in its look at this problem. But again, with so many needle exchange programs to be so established throughout America and other countries.
Now, what about cleaning of needles with bleach? We hear a lot about cleaning of needles with bleach, with alcohol. Is this effective as opposed to or in conjunction with the clean needle program?
Sure. I mean, some people, do use bleach and use it religiously, like Lamont did. I do know it's a very messy and time-consuming process, and there are a lot of factors that could.
I noticed you had one of these packets you brought with you. This is 2 bottles of bleach, or is 1 bleach and 1 water?
One's water, distilled water, so sterile water. We have a clean cooker there, which is used to dissolve your drugs, and 100% and alcohol wipes and condoms.
Right. Talking about the possibility of
Do mine 3 times and squirt it out with the bleach, and then I rinse it out 3 times with water, and then it's ready for use.
And bleach has been shown to kill the virus. Are you seeing any numbers in reductions of HIV infection in studies using just the bleach as opposed to the clean needle exchange?
I do know in terms of the Portland, Oregon exchange, the people that like to use bleach don't like to use the needle exchange. I mean, I think maybe, you need to have as many kind of options available for people.
The people who like to use bleach don't like the needle exchange?
Yeah, but it's legal there. You can buy your needles across the counter in any pharmacy.
Is there a reason for their preference to the bleach than the needles? Do we know?
Oh, I just think different people have different approaches to the way they go about their drug using behaviors.
Is it perhaps easier to carry bleach than needles and not identify yourself?
It could be many things. Probably some people just more comfortable using the bleach at home than using the needle exchange. So that's why you need to have a whole array of these options available to people.
What can we do now? I mean, this bill has been vetoed, so at this point, there is probably not going to be this funding to the San Francisco program and other programs now being modeled on that. That's not going to really take place in the near future. Where do we go from here? Now what happens?
I mean, that's a big question. Actually, Mayor Jordan last week stated in terms of San Francisco that their city will fund the Prevention Point program in defiance of the state law. This makes a very interesting legal situation to see if there'll be any prosecution of the city for enforcing, in fact, encouraging and advocating for an illegal program. In terms of Los Angeles, I don't know. I think this heightens the contradiction on the war on drugs, that we have a problem in terms of AIDS, in terms of transmission of HIV, that the government is just putting in the sand, refusing to do anything about it. So we continue our program, you know, and we'll just get larger every week.
How did you personally come to be involved with this? There's a lot of people working in AIDS. How did you become involved in AIDS, and how did you decide to found Clean Needles Now?
Well, frankly, I was that Los Angeles didn't have a needle exchange program because every other major city in America does have one, including San Diego. I thought, how could San Diego have a needle exchange, having been from there, how could San Diego have a needle exchange before Los Angeles? Now, I understand why, because it's a very complicated political situation in the city. I don't know if your viewers are aware of the fact that bleach and condoms were not made accessible to people who do outreach until March of '91. And that's incredibly late in terms of, again, a kind of aggressive outreach. And just in terms of bleach, it was illegal to carry bleach in certain parts of Los Angeles.
You saw the need and you were just simply appalled that it wasn't taking place and went with it.
Yeah, I know too many people that are HIV positive. I know too many people that have become HIV positive a year or two after they've been off drugs. And I know people that needle exchanges in other cities. So it was more, for me, a practical.
Has it been difficult for you now that you have gone public with this project? Do people harass you about the possible promotion of drug use? Do people give you a lot of flack about what you're doing?
Oh, actually, I would say quite the contrary. People really want to pat you on the head and say, oh, how courageous you are, you're such a heroine, how great that you're doing this work. And that's kind of offensive as well. I hate to be thought of as being well-meaning. I mean, I really think everyone needs to take a very activist stance in preventing and dealing with this disease.
Now, Lamont, you've gone public. This is not the first time you've spoken out publicly about being a person with AIDS and being an IV drug user.
Right.
And you've told people before that you're in sexual situations where people don't practice safer sex.
Yes.
What kind of response are you getting?
Basically, I'm getting a very positive response because people that I deal with and the people that I care about, as well as the ones that do care about me, have known my drug use anyway. So it's nothing new to them. For the people who are just finding out, there hasn't really been not too much said about it. Now, there are very close friends of mine who, for example, who do not approve of me not practicing safe sex, even though the person that I'm with are aware that I am a PWA. I've placed ads, and well, when I first started prostituting, I placed ads in the paper, the gay papers. So that was how I started out at first, and there was no mention of it, and so that created a lot of problems with people that I was very close to. So I did change that. And so now I'm very open about it. So then it is the person's choice, because I feel that we are responsible for our own actions. I cannot be responsible for the choices that you make if you are aware.
So you feel this is a matter of personal, individual responsibility?
Yes, I do.
If someone is an IV drug user, it is up to them to protect themselves and others and get clean needles.
That's right.
And if someone is having sex, it is up to them to practice safer sex.
It's up for them to practice safe sex. Even more so when that person that chooses not to practice safe sex is fully aware that he is having unsafe sex with a person that is infected.
And you tell people that you are infected?
Yes, I do.
What do you say to the people out there who may be having sex with people who aren't telling them that they're infected, who aren't telling them, well, they're not asking them? What do you say to these people having sex with people and simply guessing that they're not infected?
Well, I would say that anyone who is having sex, that you should assume that the person that you're having sex with is infected, and then take the precautions.
What do you say to people who are watching right now who are IV drug users, who may not see themselves as IV drug users but use them?
Then I would say that if you are an IV drug user, the number will be shown, and get in touch with Renee.
I'm going to give the number right now. Clean Needles Now hotline is 213-243-5378. It's an anonymous hotline.
And I'd also like to add that there is nothing like having a brand new needle every time you shoot up. It makes a hell of a big difference, believe me.
Thank you, Lamont. And on that note, thank you for watching AIDS Vision.
Is that all?